Donald, this is the fake start. I love the fake start. Hi, everyone. So I'd just like to introduce you, Donald. Donald is a friend and one of the brightest mind in the HR field, in the L&D field specifically. This tells a lot about our field. No. But basically, I met David probably 10 or 12 years ago. No, more than that, 15 years ago. When the first time I went learning technology, it's the largest and most interesting event in largest in Europe and the most interesting in the world, and always a lot of things going on over there. And also Donald's, he has this research called Global Sentiment Survey. For the past years, we are doing this in Brazil also. And today he's going to share some information about the research and some information about the Brazilian data. But also we asked him, because if you follow him on Twitter, he's completely obsessed about ChatGPT and the changes in AI and the possibilities. Sure. And we asked him to share a little bit with us his view on that. So that's what we're going to do this morning. So Donald, thank you a lot for being here. I realized that the global is on the right position this time, right?
Yes, I got the globe in the right position this time, finally. It was the wrong time last time. I'm sorry about that, but it's the right place now.
The globe's always on the correct country. So Donald, the stage is yours.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Conrado. And it's always a pleasure to be with you guys. Always a pleasure to hear what's happening in Brazil. This talks about the Global Sentiment Survey results, and that's how it's built. The results came out in February. Since then, we've printed another bit of research, which is about the use of AI in learning and development. So in fact, in this presentation, I'm going to be talking about two bits of research. I want to hear what you've got to say. So please use the chat to share questions and thoughts. Please also, we're going to make time for quick Q&A at the end. I don't want to be spending all the time talking. So we're going to have at least 15 minutes of Q&A at the end. Let's make sure we've got lots of questions developed. Carolina, I might, if the chat is going very quickly, I might say, oh, Carolina, can you save something for me, please? If you can capture that, that would be brilliant. I'm not going to talk very much about myself. I'm going to press on with the conversation. At the end, you'll have a couple of links, which are actually pretty important. You can link in with me at the end so we can continue the conversation. Firstly, I always have to say thank you to our sponsors who make it possible to get the survey out each year, the Global Sentiment Survey. I also have to thank, of course, Novi for being a sponsor, well, being a media partner and a regional partner for South America to make it possible for us to get in the Brazilian vote. We'll be talking in this presentation about the Global Sentiment Survey, but also about what the results look like for Brazil. I'm going to draw on two bits of research in this. The first one, the biggest one, which will take up most of the presentation, is the one on the left, the Global Sentiment Survey. But also, there's this report that came out in April, AI in L&D from talk to action, which is talking about how...
sharing your screen?
Yeah, I am sharing my screen, but I'm obviously not sharing it. Let me start again. Okay, good. I'm sharing my screen now properly. You wouldn't believe that I've done over 700 webinars, would you? It's just, I was so relaxed, Conrado, chatting with you. I'd completely forgotten that we were supposed to be on Zoom. There we go.
That's what I'm here for.
So a big thank you to our sponsors for making it possible to get the research out, and of course to Novi for making it possible to pull in research results from South America and Brazil in particular. I'm going to be drawing in this presentation from two different bits of research that we've done, mostly the Global Sentiment Survey, the one on the left, but also this new piece of research that we brought out in April, which is AI in L&D from talk to action. Now, don't worry about the URLs under there and trying to copy them. I will put a lot of stuff into the chat later on. But also, at the end of the presentation, there's going to be two QR codes, and you can scan those, and you can link in with me, and you can also download the slides in PDF format, and all the links are on the slides when you download them, so it's very straightforward. By all means, take pictures, by all means, copy and write and what have you, but don't worry, just download the slides at the end. And you don't have to give your email address or anything. It just takes you straight through to a place where you can download the slides. We're going to talk about 5 things. Start with the Global Sentiment Survey for this year. Then I want to draw on that second report to talk about AI in L&D. Then I want to talk about a couple of things which are outside AI, because although everyone's talking about AI and it's super important, the world doesn't stop there. So let's talk about what else is happening. I want to focus on Brazil, and then I've got 2 slides for the conclusion. All right, we've got a lot of ground to cover, and I want to make sure that we have time for a conversation at the end. So I'm going to move on. Let's start with the first one, Global Sentiment Survey. The results for this year. The survey has been going for 11 years, and every year there is one obligatory question: what will be hot in workplace learning and development next year? We give people a list of 16 things, and they can choose 1, 2, or 3 things from that list. The survey has been going for 11 years. This year we had over 3,000 voters from nearly 100 countries. There are 4 questions overall, and it's just this one question which is the obligatory one. There's another question: where do you live? And I also ask people 2 other questions. One is, where do you work? And you can see that, and the result is the same each year, strangely. About half the people work in L&D, in the workplace. The rest are in various different places. And the other question I asked them is, what's your biggest challenge this year? And the challenge question was answered this year by 94% of people. They wrote a total of 27,000 words, which is, if you know Ernest Hemingway's book, The Old Man and the Sea, that he got the Nobel Prize for, is about 27,000 words long. So each year I'm reading a book full of people's misery and disappointment and sadness. It's depressing, but it's also really important, because we always talk about what's exciting. We need to talk as well about what the problems are. There's a lot of Portuguese going on the chat from Conrado and Carolina, so thank you for that. Sorry, I don't speak Portuguese. It is a beautiful language. I don't speak it. Thank you for listening in English, and by all means, if you chat in Portuguese, I'm sure it'll be translated, or do it in English and I will comment. I'm not going to look at the challenges this year. We don't have time. If you download the report, there's quite a lot about the challenges in there, but there's one really important thing I want you to take away. We've had this question, what's your challenge, for the past 3 years. For the past 2 years, 40% of people answered it. This year, 94% of people answered it. What does that tell you? Apart from anything else, it just tells you that the learning and development profession this year was worried. If we have time in the Q&A, I'll describe some of the things that we were worried about. But the big thing that people were worried about was AI. Okay, I'm going to show you quickly the 16 things that we asked people to choose from. We asked them, what is going to be hot this year? All right, I'm having a sip of water. Can you just quickly look at that and choose one thing, just one thing that you think is going to be hot or important this year? Go ahead, and I'm going to have my little sip of water. What do you think is hot from this list this year in 2024? Carolina's come straight in with AI, exclamation mark. Yeah. When I ask this question online, AI is always the first thing because it's on people's minds, but also because it's just 2 letters, so it's quick. And then Juliana comes in with skills-based, Tiago, learning analytics, and other ideas start coming in. Showing value, says Tiago as well. Analytics, Raphael. Personalization for Mariana. Sarah prefers the skills-based approach. Mariana looking at collaborative. Nathan showing value. Okay. The important thing about this is probably that whatever you are sharing here, that's right for you. There's no right or wrong answer to this. I'm going to show you in a moment what 3,000 200 people think internationally, all right? But the answer here for you is right for you. And if you think something's important in your context is your country, your culture, your company. If something's important for you, it's important for you. So don't, when I show you this list in a minute, don't worry that you've got it wrong. And everyone's getting involved here. It's great. I'm loving this. And Roberto is saying, look, it's not on the list, but my thing is human and relations quality. Interesting point, Roberto. We're going to really focus on human beings and some of those things. And Juliana's saying mental health at next year's Learning Technologies Conference, because it is time to remember that we are human. Okay, let me go on, and I'm going to show you the results of the survey this year. And as I say, this is what some people thought, not everybody. Okay, here's the list. You may have seen this already. I'm going to quickly explain what is going on with this table. Here you've got the ranking. Here you've got the thing that we're asking about. The number in brackets is where it was last year. This number here is the share of the vote. And the arrows are whether this is a greater share of the vote or less than last year. I'm going to take you very quickly through the results and what I think they mean. The key takeaways for me, number one, I'm loving, by the way, all these answers. Thank you very much for coming in and sharing all these thoughts. It's super useful and super important that we all share what we're thinking. And please keep bringing your thoughts into the chat. The key takeaway from this, obviously, if you look at this table, is that AI dominates it, because that 21.5% there is much bigger than the next number, 11%. That's a huge number. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Okay, I'm going to drop in that link to the report. I'm sure people are going to want that, and I can see it's happening there. So there's the link for the report, but also you can download the slides at the end, and all the links will be in the slides. So AI dominates, but the second thing is to look beyond number one at the top five. And in that top five, we can see that data and skills are in every one of these options. There's something else to look at as well. The only green arrows are in the top of the table. That's where things are going up versus last year. The rest of the table, it's all going down. And there's a gap here of 2%, well, 1.9% between 5 and 6, which is quite large. So these things are doing better. Everything else is doing worse. That's what I mean by consolidating. The things which are powered by data and which are focused on skills are much more important this year. They were more important last year. This is a trend that I want to come back to. The noise around AI takes us away from something else which is important, which is this thing here, which is a bigger, longer-term trend. There's a third thing here, which is not on the table at all, and that's when you look at the challenges. When you see that 94% of people are answering the question, what's your biggest challenge? We know that there are challenging times for L&D at the moment. Okay, I'm going to press on, but please keep the chat coming. I'm loving Roberto. In the times of intelligent machines, whoever has a heart is a king or queen. So thank you for that. Please keep your inspiration coming into the chat room. Okay. One thing you have to know, because we're going to look a little bit at the data, is that over time, the options tend to trend downwards. So something starts off quite high and then it comes down. So this is mobile delivery, which went from being very hot in 2016 down to being not hot at all last year. And then I took it off the survey. And I took it off because basically now people see mobile delivery as being business as usual. But sometimes things start high and they fall away just because people are excited about something and then it's not so exciting. Maybe it's a niche case. Now, AI, which is the orange line here, looked like it was following that trend. So it went up, people were really excited about it in 2019, and then it started falling away quite quickly. Then it came up again, unexpectedly, in 2022. The blue line is VR and AR, and that was following the same trend. Well, VR and AR has done what we expect options to do. It has fallen away over time. AI, as we know, last year jumped up because of ChatGPT, and this year it went through the roof. What happened? How big was it? Well, look, going back to 2016, which is when we started having 16 options on the table, so it's comparable, how many votes did it take to be number one? It was between 13.5 and 10.5%. This year it was 21.5%. This is historically unprecedented. It's never been this big before. So we know AI is very big, right? It was also big in every one of the working groups, whether you're working in education or learning and development. It was also big in every territory in the world. There are 10 territories in the world. AI was number one in all of them. AI was number one when this research was done in December, January. Well, was anybody doing anything with AI? This research, which we brought out in November last year, asked people, what are you doing with AI? And we looked at about 180 companies, 185 companies, and we looked at what they were doing. We divided it into two groups. Either they were doing nothing or they were exploring AI, or they were doing something. And there are two groups, two categories of respondents to our survey: employers and non-employers. Well, the extraordinary thing was that these people who were positive about AI, which is why they responded to the survey, even the people who were positive about it and were interested in it, 45% of the employers were doing nothing or just exploring it. And this research was published on the anniversary of the launch of ChatGPT. So after 1 year, these people, super interested, were still not doing anything with it. So I think one thing from that is, don't worry if you're not doing anything with AI, because not many people were. I say were because things have changed a bit. I'd like to move on to the second stage of the presentation and talk about this report, which came out in April and is a follow-up report to the November one. It asks, have we moved from talk to action? And I know people are going to say, where's the URL for this? So I'm going to drop the link into the chat. There we go. Okay. So what's happened here? In this report, we didn't ask people, what do you plan to do? What might you do with it? We asked people, what are you actually doing in it? What are you doing right now or in the next 3 months? So quite a tight timescale. What are you doing with AI? We surveyed 317 people, and we found that there was substantial use of AI in L&D. And what I want to do here is just take you through how it's being used right now. Now, I think this will probably maybe create a few questions in people's minds. I'm very happy for you to ask the questions now or to ask them later on during the Q&A. So we gave people a list of things that they might be doing. Here's the list of things here, and they could choose one or they could choose all of these things. On average, people chose 4 things. Some people did choose everything, but most people chose about between 2 and 6. So most people were quite sensible answering it. I want to look at this in terms of 5 categories of how AI is being used in L&D right now. And then we're going to look at, what does this tell us about AI and learning and development in organizations? So the first point is that these orange or tan colored ones are all about content. You can see that most of the use of it was for content, either creating content or helping with design or doing research, and of course, translation. Interestingly, the translation piece was much higher for countries outside UK and US. The second part that dominated people's thinking was delivery. But you can see there's a lot less on delivery than there is on content up here. Third part was data and skills. Now, it's interesting that data and skills, a lot of people have been talking about how powerful AI can be to define, discover the skills you have in an organization. There's three questions which people want to know. What skills do we have? What skills do we need? And how do we bridge from where we are to where we need to be? AI can help with that. And there are some good case studies around it. And there are some case studies in our survey report, but there is much less work being done on that than all the talk would suggest. Why? Because it's difficult. And I'm going to come to that in a minute. And finally, performance. Performance support shouldn't be difficult with AI, but it's really low down. And I'm not quite sure why. Okay. I'm loving all this Portuguese in the chat because I can understand about 10% of it. So yes, if you want to say again, Conrado.
It's mostly logistics when it is in Portuguese.
I get it. I'm just excited. I love languages. I must say, to participate in the Q&A, please put your questions in Portuguese or English as you prefer, and we'll put them to Donald. That's my guess as to what that means. But I shouldn't distract myself by trying to translate from Portuguese into English. I don't speak it. I'm going to look at what this means in just a second, but I want to point out there's something missing from here as well, which is I believe there's a huge possibility for using AI across communities to discover what the community is thinking, how we can support the community, and to find out great information from communities. And that is not reflected on here. And I think it's something that's going to become much bigger in the future. Okay. What does this tell us about how we can and should use AI in L&D in organizations? So my colleague here, Egla Vinalskaita, she's the co-author of the report. She came up with this idea called the complexity scale, which goes from simple uses of AI to sophisticated uses. And the difference between whether something's simple or sophisticated is that on the simple side, we can use it without having to talk to anybody else. We can use AI autonomously by ourselves. In the sophisticated uses, we need extra skills, we need technology, and we need, most of all, relationships. So what does this look like? Well, there are... Okay, Carmelo asks a great question. I didn't ask the question. We didn't put it on the list of things to ask people. But also, Carmelo, nobody raised the community bit in the other option. So we did a lot of work trying to find out what were the right things to ask in the first place. And it wasn't on our list. And then we invited people to respond to it. So we couldn't find anybody using it to begin with, but also nobody suggested to us that community was something that they were using it for. But that will change. Thanks for the question. Great question. What are the example things that you can do in a simple way or a sophisticated way? Well, the simple stuff is admin tasks, help with email, help with administration, learning, design, and content. Now, I think there's a big gap here before you get onto skills, practice, data, and all the way up to skills management, because these things are more complex. And to give you examples of what they look like, here are some examples of what's going on. And I recommend downloading the slide deck, going to this URL, following Egla, because she's very smart and she's doing a lot of thinking around this. The key thing for me here is that we do this stuff autonomously. And we might think, well, it's a natural thing. We'll start with learning content and we will progress naturally to skills practice, performance support, skills management. But I don't think the progress is necessarily inevitable. the gap between this and this is that we need more skills. Absolutely. We need to understand data. We need to understand the organization. We need technology. If you're dealing with skills, you probably need sophisticated databases, but most of all, you need relationships. Whenever I've looked at what makes a successful implementation or use of any technology in an organization, the organizations which are most successful are the ones where the L&D person has a great network of relationships across the organization. It's not to do with technology. It's about how well you can get other people to do things. And believe me, and I wrote about this recently on LinkedIn, if you are dealing with AI, you are dealing with data. If you're dealing with data, the data you need is elsewhere in the business. It's the business results, the people data, and that data belongs to somebody else, and you need to persuade them to give you access to the data. So that requires relationships and interpersonal skills. I don't think, as I say, it's necessary that we can automatically go from the left side to the right side. I think we need to develop the skills and the relationships very consciously to do that. Can I just say, if somebody sends me a direct message in Portuguese, I can't understand it. You'll have to put the direct message into the chat, and then Caro or Conrado will be able to translate it for me. Yeah, thank you. So for me, that's a really important point, is that ultimately the use of AI comes down to good relationships in the organization. Let's look at going beyond AI for a moment, then look at Brazil, and then wrap up and have a conversation. So you remember our results table, we have these arrows that go up and down. That's great, but it doesn't tell us how much things went up and down. Well, this table does. So you can see at the top of the table, there are three things that 2 went up this year. 1 thing went down by 0.1%, so a very small amount. Everything else fell away. Well, actually, I didn't include AI on this because AI would just go right the way across with blue. It went up by 10%. Everything else went down. I just want to look at one thing here and then come back to look at the top of the table. These 3 options here, I've always regarded as being core to learning and development. I think we should consult with the business, do something like performance support that provides direct value, and then we should show the value. So what's the problem? Try to solve the problem, and then show that we've solved the problem. I want to show you how those 3 options have performed over the past 8 years. So initially, consulting with the business and showing value were slowly declining, which is what we'd expect. In 2019, I added performance support onto the table, and something strange happened. They stopped falling away. They went flat. In fact, there's a very slight increase between 2019 and 2023 with these. Something seemed to be happening with learning and development. We seemed to be thinking it was really important to do this business of showing value. But then this year, what happened? Well, as we might expect, perhaps, with AI sucking up all those votes, everything fell away. And it fell away very dramatically. All right. So for me, the question here is, and I don't have an answer, does this mean that the world doesn't care about value? Does it mean that the world has solved the problem of value? Does it mean that everyone was interested in value and then AI came along and we were all excited by it and we forgot about value? I think it's the last one. I think we were distracted. I am very, very keen to see what happens next year. Will we get an uplift in these as AI's vote comes down? Let's see. Okay, just want to do 2 more slides here on the bits outside AI as a trend, because there's something bigger than just AI itself. If we look at the top of the table here, we see these 3 things did well this year. And if we go and look at what the results have been in the top 5 of the table for the past 4 years and then 8 years, I think there's an interesting trend here. As I said earlier, these things here are all focused on skills and they rely on data. 4 years ago, well, some emphasis on data here, but also we've got, I don't know, collaboration, which wasn't in the top 5 this year. And then if we go back to 2016, look what we've got: collaboration, consulting, mobile delivery, micro learning. This is traditional learning and development focused on people. By 2024, it seems we've shifted to be much more focused on data and skills. AI is one part of this, and it's a very big part of it, but underneath it, it seems there's a trend to us focusing much more on learning and development being supported by or driven by data. I'm not saying it's good or it's bad. I'm just saying that looks to me like a significant long-term trend. Okay, and a great question about sensitivity of AI. And also, Gabrielle, thank you for your question. And fantastic. Yeah, but Christine, I'll just answer that point about that in a second. But can we keep Gabriella's and Anna's questions for later on? Christina, maybe people are expecting AI will show value in the easier way is a really good answer to that question I raised earlier. Yes, maybe they are. Maybe they are looking to it to help solve the value problem. And I really think that's a really strong answer to the question. And I think we'll see next year whether that gets realized or not. I want to spend 5 minutes on Brazil, then let's have a conversation. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, the team in Novi, for bringing in the votes from Brazil, 144 people. That was great. And you can see that it very much like the world, about half of the people come from workplace learning and development. I'm not going to go through all the detail very quickly. I'm going to cover just a few big things, and by all means, download this to have a look at what this means for you. You can look over it in more detail. The first thing to notice is that obviously artificial intelligence was big in Brazil. Fine. Although we'll look at that in a second. But look at collaborative and social learning. It was #1 in Brazil. It's always #1 in Brazil. It is a really strong trend that Brazil always shows. We have 16 key countries on the research. It's always #1 in Brazil, collaborative learning. Let's just look at artificial intelligence. I said, yes, of course it's high, but let's have a look quickly. Last year, I was really worried. Look, in Brazil, interest in AI hadn't jumped at all. It started to pick up in the rest of the world, then it drove up. So it's not inevitable that AI was high this year. It looked to me like it might end up here somewhere. So Brazil is tracking the rest of the world on that. Some great questions coming in. Carolina, I'm going to have to ask you to get hold of some of these questions and get them ready for in a minute, because they are great. Thank you, Leticia and Paolo. In terms of collaborative and social learning, I just want to make the point that it's not a one-off thing. Every year that we've had good data for it, Brazil has been above the rest of the world. It is trending downwards slightly. I'm not worried about that. I think it shows probably a cultural trend in Brazil to be more collaborative. If we look at what's lower in Brazil versus the rest of the world, this has always been the case. Brazil is never interested in VR and AR. Consulting with the business looks about the same, 5.4, 5.3. Let's look at that in a second. Firstly, VR and AR, Brazil, that's the world in blue, and Brazil just not interested. Thank you very much. It may be a sampling error, I don't know, but it's very consistent over 4 years. Consulting with the business, if you remember, it was 5.3 for Brazil and 5.4 for the world. But here, there's an interesting trend in Brazil that's different. Brazil has picked up its interest in consulting considerably over the past few years, and it's now almost the same as the world's, whereas it was a much bigger gap earlier. That shows a trend to me, which is significant in terms of how people are viewing the relationship with the business. Let's look at Brazil versus last year very quickly and then wrap up with some conclusions. So firstly, Conrado, I have to come out to Brazil because I don't know what it is about the place. It is just different. It is, you just do things differently. The rest of the world looks at reskilling, upskilling. It's really excited about it. It votes it down by 1.1%. But look, in Brazil, it jumps up by 1.3%. That's just crazy. And coaching and mentoring, 5% for the rest of the world. Sorry, 5% last year for Brazil and 6%. So a rise of 1% for coaching and mentoring versus the rest of the world made it fall by 1.5%. So these trends going up versus last year for coaching and mentoring and for reskilling, upskilling, just completely different to what the rest of the world is doing. And the same is true also on some of the things where Brazil voted down this year versus last year. So personalization, adaptive delivery, very high last year and dropped down here. You remember, personalization was the one thing that showed a good jump this year for the rest of the world by 0.6%. And look at all these other things that are down. Now, there's something common about all these things that are falling away. And I think if we look at those and we look at the things that are going up, it's quite interesting. Reskilling, upskilling going up, coaching, mentoring going up. But these things, personalization, micro learning experience platforms, the metaverse coming down. I don't want to paint this too dramatically, but it seems as if Brazil is really keen on the people side of things this year, but this year is really less interested in the technology side of things. It might be a sampling issue. Last year's sample was bigger. It might be that we have more people who are interested in people and less in technology. But we've seen some of those trends over the past 4 years be quite consistent. So I'm not convinced. I think we'll have to come back to this next year and see whether there's a pro-people trend in Brazil. But from now, my summary is, we know Brazil is more interested in coaching, mentoring, reskilling, upskilling. We know the love affair with collaboration continues in Brazil. Is it, in comparison with the rest of the world, that Brazil prefers people over technology? We don't know yet. It is definitely increasingly interested in consulting with the business. Let's wrap up and then go to your questions. So 5 simple wrap-up points. AI dominated that table of what people were interested in. It was also the thing that people were most afraid of in the question, what's your biggest challenge this year? 60 people actually answered the question, what's your biggest challenge? With 2 letters, AI. That's how scared people were of it. Interest in value, you remember, seems to be fading. Let's see next year. We've seen that AI in learning and development currently is mostly about content creation, production. Maybe it seems that Brazil's more interested in people than tech, and we might be moving. Remember those 3 tables from 8 years ago, 4 years ago, 8 years ago, 4 years ago, and today? We might be moving towards a world that's much more data-driven than it's been in the past in L&D. I want to wrap up, in case you're still feeling overwhelmed by AI, with my final page from the report. L&D can have a powerful impact, but it's our choice. It's our choice what we do in L&D. So let's take the initiative and do a great job with it. And I'll drop all those links in a second. Right, as promised, here are the QR codes. That's me on LinkedIn. I always say it's the end of a presentation, hopefully the beginning of a conversation. Please feel free to connect and to follow. If you've got a problem, I'm usually happy to try to find a solution for you. I won't know the answer, but I know lots of people. I have a big network. You can message me and say, Donald, what can we do about X? And I can ask the network, because other people will have the same problem, and then we can share it and have a conversation. And the other QR code is for the slides. And I'll just drop all of these into the chat, and then let's have some Q&A.
No, thank you. Every is better, and your view on AI, it's so interesting. I like the way you analyze the data. There's some of your view on that. I think it's very important. And by working in Brazil, I think you have a very interesting perception of what we're doing here. And on the other hand, what I see is people so overwhelmed trying to catch up
Yes.
all the learning depths that they have on the past 2 or 3 years. And I see a lot of people going back to traditional structure lab because people want
Yes.
to see other people. So my first question, and then Carolina will organize all the questions. Have amazing questions here, but I'd like to start with, how do you feel in other countries the way people are dealing with the lack of time, which I think is an issue of our times. So, because in order for us to change the way we're doing L&D, to try to integrate AI, as you mentioned, we need more relationships, we need much more different skills. How do you see people doing that, and what's your hint for people to find time to reboot the way they're doing or try to do that?
Two answers. Firstly, last week I was in Brussels and I was talking to people. I had the conversation, about 100 people in a room. What are you doing and how are you dealing with it? Nobody said, I'm afraid about my job, which was very strange. Last year, lots of people would have said that. This year, they didn't say it. I think what they're doing is being quite cold about where they're using their time. And one of the big challenges we have is, how do you use your time? I spoke to Heather Stefanski, who's the Chief Learning Officer for McKinsey, not long ago. And she said, Donald, here's what I do. I look at my diary and I assess, where am I spending my time? I need to spend at least half my time in meetings. And those meetings need to be outside of learning development. They need to be with people who are strategically important. That's a really weird thing for somebody to say in L&D. What she's saying is, it's not about content production. It's about building those relationships and being very focused on that. That means you've got to make time. To make time to have those meetings, you've got to stop doing something else. And the meetings have to be with a purpose. They can't just be for a conversation. But to make that time, I would say, and it's what I'm hearing people doing, they are using AI and other tools to create content faster. And then they're not, if you've got 10 hours in the day and you can create all of your content in 1 hour, what do you do with the remaining 9 hours? You don't use it to create more content. You use that time to do something else. So they are being very clear about the use of their time and being very focused on using it to do stuff that isn't about creating more content, but about building relationships, understanding the business. Oh, I can stop sharing my screen. Yes, sorry, Caroline. I was getting so excited with talking with Conrado there. Let me stop sharing.
So, Carol, let's hear some of the questions, if you want to start.
Sure, we have a lot of questions. We have a lot of questions on AI and data.
Yes.
Everybody's concerned about that. So Gabrielle Hayes asked, with the knowledge we have of AI today, how can we use it to help in identifying training needs?
Yeah. I mean, that's a whole hour-long webinar itself, but let's try to boil it down. The problem with trying to define training needs in the past has been, it's a very time-consuming business. How do you know what skills you've got and what skills you need? The promise of AI is that it can look across people in an organization and help understand what skills they may have, and they can also look at the jobs you've got and define what skills are needed for those jobs. That's the promise. Now, it is complicated to do that at scale. So large organizations, Johnson & Johnson, Ericsson, Unilever, BP are doing this, but these are big organizations. If you're working in an organization that isn't 100,000 people plus, it's difficult to justify the time, but you can still do it. You can use AI to focus on a few skills, a few jobs that are important, use that to understand the most important skills in those most important jobs, and then use it to help you understand, by going across what people are doing in the organization, and automatically find the people who are best skilled at something. Now, the caveat here is always that I don't believe you can leave it entirely to the machinery. You have to have people involved. And above all, I think you have to use the AI and what it produces as a starting point to say, here, manager, is what your person can probably do. Person, employee, here is what we need you to do. Now, have a conversation around what they need you to do, what you can do, and use the AI input for the manager and the employee to have a conversation about it, because that's where these things should happen at a discussion level. There's a risk that, and then from that, you can go to a training needs analysis. There's a risk here that people just think they can press a button and produce a training needs analysis. I don't think you can do. I think it's very dangerous to assume we can. But look, this is a massive issue. I'm very happy to continue that conversation later on LinkedIn. Please, Gabriela, don't regard that as just being the final word. What else do we have, Karen?
I have a question about the sensitivity of the data.
Huge question. That was Anna, yeah.
Yes, about the sensitive data and confidential information. How can we address or minimize it?
There were so many stories in 2023 about disasters happening with AI. This is a real issue. It also means that the rest of the business looks at anybody using AI with skepticism, or might do, and might say, we're going to take it very carefully before we do anything. So to make sure that we're using AI sensitively, I'm afraid it depends on exactly what you're doing. The best thing to do is obviously to take a safety first approach, but also to make friends with people in the IT department if you have one. If not in your organization, if you don't have somebody, with people elsewhere who can provide good advice. And it sounds like a strange thing to say, but actually what matters about data is not a universal rule that can be applied to everybody. What matters is, how does your organization choose to deal with data? So I would look at your organizational standards and work with the IT department to meet those, rather than trying to solve the problem within L&D, because I think it's impossible to do that. I hope that makes sense. Again, this is an important question. I'm making a note here of all of these, because I think that these are questions which we can put to the community and get more thoughts on, and some practical examples. What's next, Caro?
Donald, let me just do a follow-up question on that. Do you think that L&D departments should have like a L&D lab, apart from the traditional day-to-day business, at least part-time, so that they can prepare themselves to the changes? Because what I'm seeing here is that we don't have time to understand the changes or to apply the changes, and there are new one coming every other month. Like you wrote on Twitter, I think a week ago, about ChatGPT 4.0. It's changing everything again. So we have the feeling that we are again overwhelmed, and we don't even have time to understand what's going on.
Okay, here's the answer. You don't have to do the latest thing. That's really important. All the news is about the latest thing. So right now it's about GPT 4.0, and it's mind-blowing, right? But bear in mind that research we showed earlier, 1 year after the launch of ChatGPT, 45% of employers who were excited about AI weren't using it. You don't have to move to do the latest thing. You do have to do something. Now, should we have a lab? Maybe. I would download the April report. I'll put the link in the chat again, and I would look at what Ericsson are doing with this, because Ericsson are very, very clear about using all of the expertise in their organization to test things out. So yes, they believe in testing and trying, but they don't try to keep it within L&D. So what they do is they define 4 things they're looking for, 4 work streams where they want to have an impact with AI. Then they go out to a community. For Ericsson, it's a community of about 400 people. Maybe 30 to 40 of those are in L&D. The rest of them are employees who are just in the business, but they're all excited about AI and excited about learning. And they give them experiments, and they say, can you experiment with translation? Can you experiment with providing a synopsis from a large document using these technologies? And they go and they try, they may fail, they may succeed, and they come back. So we've got the definition clear. We want to look at these 4 things, a big lot of experimentation. And then at the end, they've got 3 very clear criteria which they use. We're going to buy it, we're going to borrow it, or we're going to wait. And I think that last one's really important. You don't have to fuss about always doing the latest thing. Sometimes with AI, the best thing to say, this will be useful, but not yet. So we're going to wait until the best solution comes along. And I think that's, I think what I like about that Ericsson approach is that they've got a clear structure for it. It allows experimentation and they get people involved elsewhere. So my answer to you, Conrado, is yes, have a lab for experimentation, but don't make the people in the lab only from L&D. I'm getting a lot of people, I think, saying, who can we share and so on? Who can we follow and so on? So I'm just going to quickly, I'm going to be typing in the background. I'm going to produce very quickly a short list of people to follow on LinkedIn about this, because I can see people are interested in that. Sorry, Conrado or Caro, I don't know who I'm going to next.
Here we have a question about learning experience platform. So
Yep.
I think it is an interesting one. Laura asked it, first she thanks you for sharing all the reviews. And she said, in the company where I work, we have over 17,000 direct employees. And with the challenge of engaging, especially the more operational positions for the learning experience on our LXP platform. So what the trends or cases do you bring for LXP platforms to gain engagement within companies?
Okay, it's a good question. It's a very big one, and it's something that is really concerning. We've got like 2 minutes. This is something which we've had as an issue at Learning Technologies every year for the past 25 years that I've been chairing it, okay? Not with LXPs, but it's the same issue. How do you get engagement? I'm going to try to sum all this up in 1 minute. So the key thing for engagement with an LXP or anything else is that you're providing value for the people you want to use it. Or it has to be mandatory training that people have to do just because they've got to do it for the business. But let's push the mandatory training to one side. The point is to provide value to what people are doing in their day-to-day work. Now, if you think about that, it's a slightly different approach to saying, well, how do I engage people? It's much more, how do I provide value for people, which then leads people to go on to want to do the training. So I'd always start with the job. I mean, it sounds so simple, and I appreciate it. It sounds trivial almost, but it's not. So I'd say start with the job, start with what's required on the job, and once you've got what's required on the job, you need to be working with the managers to work out where are people either doing well or not doing well in the business of meeting those requirements. Then you're doing two things. You're talking about what individual employees need to deal with, and you're talking about the challenges that managers are dealing with. And if you've got those two things, then you've got something which will provide employees with the drive to get better, managers with the drive to give people time to learn, which is always a huge factor. So I'm sorry if this sounds slightly sort of unspecific. It does depend on the context, but the key thing is always to find the thing to meet the need that somebody's got and to get the managers involved so that everyone feels that it's worth doing. That's quite a long answer. I hope it works. Again, as I'm saying, please feel free to hook up with me and stay in touch about all these things. I'm going to drop into chat for people to follow on LinkedIn for more about AI in L&D. Okay, there we go. How are we doing on time?
We're out of time.
Oh no!
But this is a sign that it was a very good chat, very good conversations, or inspirational on the one hand, but also very down to the earth, meaning that I have the feeling inside me that we we don't have to rush, but we have to be very aware that this time changes is different. I don't think it's a new metaverse. I think it's something that's going to
We
change.
had a question about that. I agree. It's not a new metaverse. Listen, if people have to, Conrad, I don't know what your timescales are like. Carol, I don't know what they're like. I don't know what everybody in the room is like. If people need to go, they can go. But I'm very happy to stick around for 10 more minutes and do some more conversation, because I think it's something which is so important for people. So
let's do that. I mean,
let's do
I
it.
think let's do it, and then if you want to, if you're here and need to leave because you have another meeting, we're going to record this.
Sure.
So let's go this way. People say that this is a new metaverse, and I really don't feel this way. I think that it's a societal change going on based on that. Your view on that?
I think I've been in this. I'm 61. I've been doing training and technology since I started programming computers in 1981. And the computers that I worked on are now the National Museum of Computing in Britain. That's how old I am. And I've seen three big changes in my lifetime. The first one is personal computing. Second one is the World Wide Web. And the third one, I think, is AI, or rather, the use of data at scale, of which AI is a part. So I think that it's an absolutely crucial thing that's going to change how we live and work and learn. And it's not something which is trivial. We see small examples, ChatGPT, somebody speaking to a phone. We can't predict where we're going to be in 5 or 10 years' time. When I got married in 1997, I found the place that we were going to on our honeymoon in a small advert in the Sunday Times. I wrote them a letter. They wrote back to me. I wrote to them with a check. They wrote back to me. I didn't know what it was going to be like. Can you imagine going on a holiday like that these days? No, of course not. It's unimaginable. So if there's enough time, huge changes happen, which we can't predict. I have nothing more to base this on apart from my gut feeling and one analogy, which I think is useful here. For me, AI is like electricity. I think it's something which potentially is very dangerous. It's also hugely powerful. And in the future will change everything about how we work. Just as we've moved from steam to electricity between 1880 and 1920, we'll see that shift happening. And AI won't be something we think of as a single thing. It'll be something that powers everything. So just like you plug your device into the wall and it gets powered by electricity, something will happen in the background that makes something possible. It's AI, but we won't be thinking about it that way. Sorry, Conrad, it's a very long answer, but I just wanted to share with you my overall view of why I think this is not like the metaverse. It's something very much bigger.
And I know that this is just some weeks out in Lotion, but I saw you writing and digging a lot on ChatGPT. If you want just to explain in one sentence or in one paragraph what it is and why, I had the feeling that you were very excited about all the potentialities and what's your view on this? Even though I know it's like a 2-week launch from OpenAI.
Yeah, it's about 8 days since OpenAI launched, and it's super. Or I don't know how many it is, but something like that. It is super exciting, but we also have to be very, I think, level-headed about it. Everyone was expecting there to be a launch of GPT-5 at some point this year. I'm just putting the link into the LinkedIn article that Conrad is talking about here. Everyone expected there was going to be a really big launch of GPT-5 at some point, and it hasn't happened. And some people say, well, it hasn't happened because they haven't got the technology. Other people are saying, well, they have to say something, so they put the energy into doing GPT-4o instead. That kind of, I think, plays down what GPT-4o does, because what GPT-4o does, it makes everything faster, easier to use, and multimodal. The O stands for omni, the idea that you can now use video, voice in your inputs to GPT, and you get the outputs the same way. So it becomes something that's very different. And you will have seen, I think, probably the dialogue with Sal Khan and his son and GPT-4o, and it's acting as a If you haven't, by all means, look it up on YouTube. This device on a phone is acting as a maths tutor to his son. And his son is having a go with trying to work out how you can solve a maths problem. And the phone, or GPT-4o via the phone, looks at what he's doing, asks him questions, gets his feedback, and is able to respond to him in real time to say what he should be doing, and leads him through to the answer of the problem. Now, that's not general artificial intelligence, but it is extremely impressive. And what it makes me think is the obvious next extension for GPT in our lives and AI is coaching. And I've seen a lot of AI coaching stuff recently. Some of it is really a bit dangerously bad, and some of it is really, really impressive. And I think that's something that we should be ready to listen to. I'm talking to you, but I'm also should be looking at the chat as well, because some great thoughts coming through. Please keep the thoughts coming through. It's for everybody to share your discussion, your thoughts. So I think with the GPT-4o thing, Conrado, what I'm getting is this sense that it's moved from being something you typed into to something that's increasingly getting towards, something we use every day because it's fast and it's easy. Here's the problem always with these generative AI systems. They're fast. They are apparently amazing. We don't know how accurate they are. And this means you ask a question and the answer could be brilliant, or it could just be wrong. And you don't know. And this is why I go back to the point I made right at the beginning. It's essential to have a human being involved in the process somewhere. I think the coaching thing is a really good example. I'm going to put another link into something I wrote about coaching recently. Coaching is a superb case for the use of AI, but it's also potentially extremely dangerous. And if we're going to use AI there, we need to use it very carefully, but we can expect to get great results. Sorry, Conrad, I'm so excited about it. Look, here's the thing. I wish I was 25 again, right? And a lot of people are concerned about L&D and AI. I wish I was 25 again, because there's so much you can do with this stuff. Keep an open mind. It's going to be brilliant, really.
And I just saw that Carmelo, which is a friend, talking about the short of the I thought we are in the slope of enlightenment. I just looking for the name here. I think that we are past that, and I'm very, very excited also. And also, I think we're going to view a new group of people getting into HR. I just had a view on the data that about 70% of the HR are coming from outside HR.
Wow.
So, yeah, I'm going to send you what I see here, and it's. I mean, there's a message on that, right? I mean, we need a broader view.
I think I look at marketing. I know we've got to finish shortly, but I look at marketing as being something we should think of as a profession that has changed dramatically in the past 20 years. And L&D is going to do the same thing. Look, 30 years ago in marketing, you had long lunches with your clients. You had too much wine. You thought of a brilliant idea. You had posters and adverts, and hey, that's it. I'm a creative type. I don't need to worry about this data stuff. And it all changed with about 2010, it changed. And suddenly everything was data-driven. Marketing is actually much easier than learning and development. Learning and development is we have to persuade people to change, and they don't want to change. We've got to make it happen. Marketing it's much easier to sell somebody a new pair of sneakers. But the same thing is going to happen to us. We are going to have to use data. Let's be enthusiastic about it and use it well in order to do our jobs really well. It's going to happen. So we should embrace it and do a good job with it.
No, thank you a lot. What time is it right now? What time is it over there?
Over here, it's 10 past 2. 10 past 2, and I'm still haven't had my lunch, so I need to go and have my lunch somewhere.
It's for me. It's 6 o'clock in the morning here in LA.
Oh my goodness! Yes, Conrad, did you explain earlier where you are?
No, I don't. I didn't.
Go on, say where you are. Say where you are.
I'm in LA. There's a conference here from Bernstein that he went to learning technology. I get to know him in learning technology the first time. and with analysts, and there's a gathering here. So I woke up 4:30 in the morning just for this webinar, and it was the perfect choice. So thank you a lot. It's not
Look,
it was not a choice, to be very honest, but but thank you a lot. And Carol, brilliant
Yes.
as always, organizing everything. If you want just to say goodbye to the more than 100 people that's here, please.
Look, I'm really honored that people have stuck around for the conversation. Thank you very much, everybody. Please do stay in touch. Let's keep the conversation going, and maybe one day I'll come out to Sao Paulo and we can do some stuff face to face and continue the conversation. There's so much
Learning Technology
going on.
Brazil?
Hmm?
Learning Technology Brazil?
Yes, you can start it. I'll come over and help you with it.
Okay. Thank you. Carol?
Thank you a lot, Donald and Conrado and everybody. Agora eu vou falar em português, só para agradecer todo mundo que está aqui, que ficou até mais tempo do que a gente tinha planejado. Espero que amanhã tenha sido proveitosa para todo mundo que está aqui. E fiquem de olho na nossa programação, que a gente tem mais webinars com temas tão profundos e interessantes e que vão ser muito úteis para RH, TID, para a gente pensar no upskilling e reskilling do RH. Fiquem perto da gente. Até a próxima. Obrigada. Tchau, tchau.
Tchau, tchau. See you, Donald.
Ciao. Bye.